This is where your classic car story begins. I'm Graham Eason and I founded Great Escape Cars because I love these old cars and I want to share the passion and the enjoyment of driving cars from the last 40 and 50 years on some brilliant roads. So we're going to give you some advice and some tips just to get the most out of your experience. Welcome to Great Escape Cars.
Like Graham, our whole team is passionate about giving you the best experience possible in our spectacular range of cars. We've put this film together to familiarise you with the cars, but don't worry, we'll also give you one-to-one advice when you collect the car. We want you to have a fantastic experience behind the wheel. This is your classic motoring story.
You can't rush how you start an old car. You can't be impatient when you start an old car. So I'll give you an example. When I first started out, and I had a Jensen first on the fleet, when the Jensen is quite hard to start, a customer came to pick the car up, and I showed them how to start the car, and they flooded it. And I flooded it when I then showed them how to start it again. And we got into such a situation with this car that they actually had to go away for 2 hours, have a meal, and then come back and have the car and start it. And when it came back to start it, I'd lost the keys for it. So it was a bit of a comedy of errors, but we did eventually get it started.
We want to avoid a comedy of errors for you. Starting a classic car is a dying art. It's something we urge you to enjoy rather than rush. When starting a car with a manual choke from cold, keep the choke lever all the way out and keep your foot poised, ready to catch the throttle when the car fires into life. Don't hold the throttle down, as this will flood the engine and could also cause damage when the car starts and the revs shoot up. Certain cars have specific starting procedures. The Mark II Jaguar, for example, has a start button on the dashboard. The key does not start the engine, but it's easy to forget this and try to turn the ignition barrel too far, causing damage. In the Jensen Interceptor, you pump the throttle to prime the carburetor before turning the key and holding it in the engine start position until it fires into life. The best piece of advice we can give you is be patient. And don't worry, you'll be given all you need to know for the car you're driving during the handover process.
In the 70s and the 60s, people used to go out in the morning, start the car up, and obviously put the choke on and leave it warming up while they finished their cup of tea for about 5-10 minutes, so that when they drove off, the heater worked and the car was warm. But of course you can't really do that now in today's world, because people sit there with the car warming up. It's not the most pleasant thing. But you need to do it with a classic car. You need to warm it up, because if you try and drive a classic car when it's cold immediately, you're going to be kangarooing the road, and everyone's going to be standing on the pavement laughing their socks off. So please warm it up before you drive the car.
While we care about global warming, we're pretty sure you warming an MGB or E-Type Jaguar up for 10 minutes isn't going to impact things that hugely. Remember not to leave the car unattended when it's running though. Those were better days Graham was talking about. Remember to push a manual choke back in when the car warms up. Leaving the choke on will cause damage to the engine and will affect your driving experience. Once a car is up to temperature, it shouldn't require any choke to start. Cars with automatic chokes will noticeably become smoother and quieter when they've warmed up and come off choke. So listen out for this. And if you're driving the car cold, please be patient.
My dad borrowed one of our cars and just sort of for the weekend to drive around in, and the XJS, and he drove it a few miles and got out of it and said, "That's fantastic." I wasn't in the car. He said, "But there's a problem with the handbrake light on it." I said, "Yeah, there's a problem with the handbrake on it because you've just burnt the handbrake out on it." And yeah, I didn't tell him it was £600, but I was unhappy about that.
Some of the handbrakes simply take more effort, but other cars, for example the XJS, have what's known as a fly-off system. To engage, you pull up the lever like normal, then let it fall to the floor. To release, you pull it to the top, then give it an extra pull and release the button before letting it rest. If the light is on the dashboard, the light isn't broken, the handbrake hasn't been fully released. Please be aware of this, as it can be expensive to replace and repair these handbrakes on the cars. And also, it could be potentially dangerous.
When I first started out, we had a E-Type, the white E-Type that we have on hire, and the guy dropped it off, and I took it out to put some petrol in it, took it along a lane, the car coming the other way, put the foot on the brakes, as I would with a modern car, and the car just completely lost control. The front wheel was locked up, and it skidded towards a ditch. Luckily missed it, and I thought, this is a bit different from driving a Ford Mondeo, so that taught me very early on.
Classic cars can catch the best of us out. The experience is not like driving a modern car. One of the first things you'll notice is the brakes. The feel, effort, and stopping distance takes some getting used to. We ask though that it is the first thing you notice. Try out the brakes and get used to them in your own time, rather than getting a shock when you first come to need them.
Back in the day, old cars didn't have things like ABS and traction control and all that, and I thought, how are we going to get the message across about these things? So I had a word with our apprentice.
Don't worry, since we shot this, we've put our apprentice on a course to top up his controlled stop skills. The serious part is that classic cars have little, or in most cases no, driver aids. Stopping, steering, and avoiding accidents is all down to the driver. We're keen to make sure the experience you have with us is a good one. Please take care.
This is an Allegro steering wheel. As you can see, it's square, of course. And it came off because the Allegro steering is so heavy that it snapped off as someone was trying to turn the wheel. So we have this as a memento.
Okay, the Allegro steering wheel didn't really break off in our hands, or the hands of someone hiring it for that matter, but at times you'll wonder how we ever managed before the wonderful invention of power steering. At low speed, the steering can be hard work, and it can also take longer to turn lock to lock. So bear this in mind if you're maneuvering in tight places.
Normally, we ask you to be really careful with the cars because they're old cars, but when it comes to the gearbox on some of the cars, particularly the Jaguars, you need a bit of aggression. You need to be able to go like this.
Every car is different, and in some cases, the gearbox will take a bit of getting used to. We always recommend people familiarize themselves with the controls before setting off from our unit. Make sure you're aware of how to locate reverse gear and ask a member of our team if you're unsure.
In the 70s, there was a competition to see who had the longest bonnet.
The longest bonnet joke. Seriously though, apart from the Mini, the cars on our fleet will all feel very long when you peer out from behind the windscreen. Add this to the fact that mirrors, when present, were in some cases bolted on more for design purposes than function, and you start to get the picture. Or lack of it. Take extra care when maneuvering and make the most of the additional visibility that comes with smaller body pillars and lower headrests.
When the first cars came out, they were using gas lights for their headlights. And when Jaguar were making cars in the 60s, I sometimes think that that's what they were using as the benchmark for their headlights.
There are certain parts of the experience of driving a classic car that you find yourself having to make excuses for, blaming things like romance and poetry. And terrible headlights is one of them. Indicators and brake lights follow suit. So be aware that you may not be as visible to fellow motorists as you are in your own car.
I'm still not entirely sure what some of the gauges do, and these are on cars that I drive on a regular basis, so I'm not sure what a battery gauge is supposed to be telling me. Is it good or bad? I don't know. It goes one way or the other, but yeah, that's there. Yeah.
If you're unsure which dials you should be taking notice of, probably don't ask Graham, but there are plenty of us who can help. All classic cars are different, and you'll get used to how a particular car behaves, where the dials sit when running in normal conditions. Keep an eye out for changes to the dials once the car is running and up to temperature, and keep a keen eye on water temperature if you're in traffic, particularly on a hot day.
So in a modern car, you've got a little readout that says 15 miles left, 5 miles left, and it's a lot of fun to see how far you can put that as low as possible. Don't do that in a classic car, because if you do that in a classic car, the classic car will go, I see what you're trying to do here, I'm going to run out of fuel right now.
Just remember, these cars have been around a while. They know all the tricks. Don't play games with the fuel gauge. All of our cars run on unleaded fuel. If you're hiring the car, please note the fuel level and return with the same amount of fuel in. The car may be going straight out again, so this helps us keep things running smoothly for our next customers.
If the seatbelt's dangling outside the door, I've got to be honest, that's not fitted correctly.
We've all seen seatbelts dangling out the bottom of doors, along with overcoats, scarves. You get the picture. But those days are gone. Seatbelts are important and they're pretty hard to replace, in our case as well. Classic cars rarely have inertia reels, so they don't retract automatically. In some cars, for example the Jensen, there are hooks to hang the buckles upon, whilst in others, the lap belts are just placed on the seat when you exit the vehicle.
Sometimes the air conditioning might be opening the windows, that might be, or putting the roof down, something like that. That is air conditioning in my world.
You're now entering Graham's world, so the sunroof and windows will become your best friends over the next few hours. Even where you come across a classic car with air conditioning, chances are this won't be quite as effective as you've come to expect of today's cars. It's all part of the experience, and a bit of airflow will probably put some of the colour back in your face after all those air-conditioned, monotonous commutes down the motorway. Embrace the world of classic motoring and remember to keep hydrated.
The smell of Brute and the smell of Old Spice and stuff like that, people loved it. Well, that is pretty much now what you have with classic cars. You have a classic car smell, and people don't bottle it, but some people, that'd be great if you could.
That's the gift shop merchandise sorted then.
When you're out on the road and enjoying your getaway, you may smell fuel and oil inside the car, especially when it gets hot. This is nothing to worry about. Old cars are very mechanical. It's all part of the classic motoring experience, and we hope you'll love it.
I know that if I get a phone call at 6 o'clock at night, an hour after the Mark II's gone out on hire, exactly what it's going to be about. It's going to be that the overflow has dropped some water onto the tarmac. It's absolutely fine, because that's exactly what that car is designed to do. But it looks really scary, but it isn't scary.
We honestly don't mind you calling us for reassurance, but we'd rather you didn't worry in the first place. So if you do notice water coming out of the car when it's hot, chances are there's nothing to worry about. Keep an eye on the water temperature gauge, and as long as the needle is within the normal operating range, you'll be fine. If the car does overheat for any reason, please call our emergency breakdown or call the emergency number in your hire information.
You've got to be realistic that old cars will have leaks, and because these engines are like 60, 70 years old, so if you're going to take one of our cars home and you've got a really nice new driveway that you've just laid, make sure you park on your neighbour's driveway.
We obviously wouldn't actually recommend leaking on your neighbour's drive, but just be aware that a slight leak isn't anything to worry about. While we provide cars fully oiled and watered, we would ask that you have a quick check of oil and water levels if you've got the car for more than 24 hours. Prevention is better and far more convenient than cure.
Classic cars don't have sat-navs. Ours do, if you can find somewhere to plug it in.
Not all of our classic cars have cigarette lighters to plug in chargers and sat-navs, and when they do, we can't guarantee they'll always work, though we do try our best.
We can't help with phone signal though. Our advice would be to embrace the classic motoring culture and do that most rare of things. Prepare your journey in advance using a map.
In the 80s, they had this thing about putting side rubbing strips on cars, and they were just massive. So in car parks, you didn't have this bashing of doors. I really miss the 80s.
this would seem like a good opportunity to give you some parking tips. While you can't always mitigate for the care other people will take when parked next to you, you can decide where to park. And we'd ask that you do that carefully. And we get less car park dents to repair, so our workshop time can be spent maintaining the important things. We've put breakdown cover in place. This is to keep you safe and keep you moving. We're always at the end of the phone, and as well as the call-out number for the breakdown service, you'll find our emergency contact details in your hire information. Classic cars can sometimes be unpredictable, and in the event something goes wrong, we would never expect you to try to fix the problem yourself. We always recommend taking an emergency bag containing warm clothing, food and drink, should you find yourself waiting for the breakdown service. We always value and act on feedback from our customers. So tell us how the experience was for you. This will help us continually improve and offer the best classic motoring experience money can buy. We accept that from time to time things do need our attention. If you spot anything, please fill in a fault card, which you'll find in the car.
Make the most of your great escape by planning your time with the car. Whether it's a wedding or a romantic getaway to the country, plan your route and your parking arrangements and allow plenty of time.
Above all else, we've put Great Escape cars together for one reason: to give you a fantastic experience of driving classic cars. So make sure you enjoy every minute.
I'm really confident that you're going to have a great time in your car. And I want to make that experience even better for people in the future. So please let me have your feedback. Give me a ring, drop me an email. I want to hear those stories about the times that you've had in my cars, because that's why I do this. Thank you for choosing Great Escape cars.